Mr. President, I have pleasure in handing over to you this evening part 1 of the report of the Commission.
After seeking extensions repeatedly, the Zondo Commission has finally delivered part 1 of the State Capture report. The acting Chief Justice and Chairperson of the State Capture Commission, Raymond Zondo, formally handed over the much-awaited report on the investigation into allegations of state capture. The buzz about state capture started in 2016 after the then Public Protector Thuli Madonsela launched an investigation after receiving a formal complaint. In her report, she recommended that a commission of inquiry into state capture be established. Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo announced that the report would be categorized into 3 sections according to their investigation.
It is indeed a very special day today when the Commission is able to deliver to the President part 1 of its report.
It's been 4 years since the announcement that a commission will be established to investigate allegations of state capture. The commission spent 3 years on its inquiry and has vowed that all the volumes of the report will be delivered by the end of next month. For those keen to see the report, the first part will be made available now that the President has received it.
State capture has damaged people's confidence in the rule of law, in public institutions, in law enforcement agencies, and even to some extent in the democratic process. That is what makes the work of this commission so essential. The people of South Africa look to this commission to uncover, as I'm sure we will read, to uncover the truth, to identify those responsible, and to recommend measures that will prevent state capture from happening ever again in South Africa.
Recently, the Commission came under fire, accused of dragging its feet and seeking too many extensions. Now the President says the complete report of the Commission will be submitted to Parliament no later than the end of June this year.
It could be before, but certainly by the 30th of June 2022. And I will also give an indication of my intentions with regards to implementing the Commission's recommendations.
So far, the Commission's probe into the allegations of state capture has cost the country close to R1 billion, but it has also managed to recoup close to R1 billion. Since its inception, the Commission has interviewed more than 300 witnesses. President Ramaphosa announced that government would wait for a full report before pronouncing on anything contained in it. However, he said, this did not prevent other institutions from taking action within their mandate.
Government will therefore not make pronouncements on the findings nor the recommendations of the Commission's report before having received all parts of the report.
Part 1 of the report is based on evidence relating to SAA and its associated companies. Volume 2 deals with the Gupta company that owned the New Age, while the last volume will deal with SARS and public procurement in South Africa. Ntlanhla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Political analyst Sandile Swana joins us now via Zoom to help us unpack this story so far. Sandile, thanks very much indeed for joining us. A much anticipated Commission report coming through today, and just before it was presented, there was a last-minute attempt at trying to stop it. I guess there are many interested parties, some worried and some curious.
Yes, I believe Democracy in Action launched a case which was eventually dismissed apparently 3 hours before Zondo could hand over that report. Now, basically their argument was that Cyril is implicated, Cyril Ramaphosa is implicated in the Zondo Commission and in the report itself, therefore is unqualified to receive it. But actually, if you think about it, and this was the argument that was presented, it was clear from the start. Remember that this investigation, the state president had to commission it and then eventually receive it. And then it was said that the Chief Justice must just appoint the judge. And at the time, Jacob Zuma was actually the state president who was most implicated in the public protector's report that actually kicked off this entire commission. And afterwards, it became clear that Cyril Ramaphosa would be both implicated in the report and receive the report. So the court said this is a waste of time, because you've known this for so long that it's going to work like this, and it should work like this. So they dismissed that particular action.
So when we look at the volumes, and the first one, SAA, I guess we have an idea on who the most implicated persons in this report might be. Who are the main characters for you?
On the SAA report, if you remember the testimonies in the Zondo Commission, people such as Dudumiyeni, who was the chairperson at some point of the board of directors of SAA, Yake Kwinana would have been one prominent figure, and then there was a Mr. Nzeku and many others, and obviously the various ministers, including, I believe, Minister Gigaba, if I'm not mistaken, of public enterprises. So the advantage of this report coming out now is that we will be aware of the identities of people who were occupying board positions at SAA, who were, let me start it this way, SAA, SARS, as well as many players who were involved in the state procurement system, because broadly that is the three areas that this report covers, as well as those who were contracting with the New Age newspaper. So those would be the people, the Gupta-aligned newspapers. So those would be the people, and then the consulting firms that and private companies, consulting firms, including international consulting firms, who were facilitating state capture, and also the related whistleblowers such as Athol Williams, who unfortunately has had to flee the country apparently because there was no protection coming from the Cyril Ramaphosa government to protect some of these whistleblowers as they were blowing the whistle in the State Capture Commission.
Okay, so the characters we know, including, of course, the chairperson of SAA at the time, who came up several times. What do you think is likely to happen? Was there criminal activity or just bad governance?
Yeah, now we need to be very careful here, because most people do not know that the Public Finance Management Act, actually breaking that law, has criminal consequences and prison time that is prescribed in the Act itself. So when you fiddle with state money, and it is under the PFMA, which a lot of these discussions fall under the PFMA, just that alone will then open you up for criminal prosecution. The second aspect of it is that you may have involved yourself in what is called bribery and corruption, which would then open you up under other acts, such as the promotion, the combating of corrupt practices act, and so on and so forth. So there will be sections where Zondo has got to point out, and I'm sure he has. The report is long, I've not yet read it, where he has to point out those who fall under those particular acts, and then those who need to be disciplined under the Public Service Commission and Internal Code of Conduct, and then those where funds need to be recovered, and so on and so forth. So there will be various categories, but certainly the actions in broad terms, the actions that were carried out here were largely criminal acts.
The public may be wondering, the NPA, the Hawks, the police, would they have to have waited for this commission report to come out, or should they have been investigating all of this time? Because it's been 4 years in the making, this report.
Yes, I think that some of the comments that were made by the Hawks and such people in the NPA and so on is that they also have been busy with their own investigation. So there are highlights perhaps that came from the Zondo Commission, but they have been busy with their own investigation. Now, lawyers will tell you that, and this is a complaint that was issued by the NPA about the reports they received from the SIU, that a lot of these reports are probably useful if you want to sue for money and recover monies and so on. But some of the, for instance, the SIU reports are not very useful to get the conviction. So additional for sort of forensic investigation, which is compilation of evidence that can be used to convict someone in court, that is a separate procedure and a separate process to do that. So a lot of quick wins will come in recovery of monies and other disciplinary process and reporting people to professional bodies, getting those who are CAs, lawyers and other registered professionals debarred from their professions, etc., etc. The actual criminal cases will probably take longer to take to court.
I mean, this first portion is over 800 pages and it literally has just been released. I don't know how much of it have you been able to peruse. Is there anything that jumps out at you? And I suppose for many, they're really trying to see how far up the chain liability goes.
Yeah, well, what I've seen is the portion where Zondo accounts as to what was he sent to do, what was the mandate of the commission, and then what has he done, and what was the scope of the commission. So the way he frames the scope in what I've seen, he lists companies, the companies that were implicated. So names like Bosasa would be in there, all sorts of names of companies. I saw about 10 names of companies that were implicated. So from this report, at least this part of the report, there's a list of names of companies that were implicated. So then if you listened, now this issue of far up the chain, clearly, for instance, in correctional services, when we listen to it goes up to the commissioner, and at times in other cases like ESCOM, it would touch the ministers who were heavily implicated in there. But we know that from listening to the commission. I haven't seen the list of names of the people who are implicated, for instance, at SAA, implicated in the procurement of the Gupta in the New Age newspapers, and so on and so forth.
It is interesting, though, that the acting Chief Justice does say in the report that no summary of Part 1 and 2 will be offered to the public, and they'll only put a summary right at the end. What might be the motivation for that, do you think? Because we would love to know more about what each part is saying, or is there a danger that the other two parts may impact on the first volume?
I think the only sensible explanation that we can give to that is that writing a summary is not an easy job, by the way, and is speeding for time to the end. So it is the duty of the analysts like myself, the journalists, and so on, and the academics all around to actually go through the 874 pages and come up with those summaries in a way. And every member of the public and the legal fraternity, as we speak now, has got access and is circulating on such social media, the full 874 pages. So you cannot say you are lacking information. You might not be keen to read the 874 pages.
You know, I'm reading some of the pieces here in the report, and, you know, one of them says the investigation reveals that there was a steady decline in the quality and effectiveness of governance in SAA from 2012 onwards. The poor quality and ineffectiveness developed over the period that Mrs. Duduzile Myeni was the chairperson of SAA and her board member, Ms. Yake Kiwana, was chairperson of SAA Technical. And I guess this really, as I say, is not a surprise. This is something that we saw in the commission. But also, when we look at the airline itself, there does seem to be a timeline of things going wrong.
What most of us don't even know about SAA is that during the time that Khaya Nqula was the CEO of that company, towards the tail end of his term of the second term of office, the success in the operations and the profitability of that company from its own internal strength had improved so much that it was used as a case study in the Harvard Business School journal, as a case study to teach students and locally at Harvard and internationally. So SAA, during the last part of Mbeki's era, was actually a world-class company. It was considered as a top-performing company, a case study to learn from. And then the Polokwane conference came, and then all sorts of things happened to the point where it is a total and absolute disaster.
The report also talks about the auditors, external auditors, failing to detect fraud and corruption that had happened in those years. This is a serious indictment on the auditing profession and the auditors themselves, and certainly they need to be brought to book about not seeing some of the things that were taking place.
Yes, the issue that has to be determined there is whether the auditors were in collusion with the corrupt leadership that was in place at the time. So that would be the issue. Because in general, it is whistleblowers, by and large, who uncover fraud in companies. It is not auditors. External auditors, if you look at the statistics of how fraud is uncovered in major institutions, it is usually whistleblowers who help with that. The auditors of our day are not as competent in uncovering sophisticated fraud. And I don't even think the fraud that was going on in our state institutions was professional at all. It was amateurish for the most part. So they should have uncovered it, except if they were in the pocket of Dudu Myeni, Yake Kwinana, and others.
The report states categorically that there was fraud and corruption taking place at SAA and SAA Technical. So that means people must be arrested and people must go to jail.
Yes, it does mean that. What needs to happen there was fraud and corruption that happened. Fraud, under all conditions, fraud is a criminal case. Corruption is not always the corruption that can send you to jail all the time. It's not always criminal, the civil corruption, but certainly I would anticipate that senior leaders and senior management, senior board members and senior management at SAA and SAA Technical, all of those do need, once the charges, the evidence has properly been gathered, to face proper charges. There's no doubt about it.
We've run out of time, but there is one point that I would like to raise, because this whole thing was about state capture. And in one line it says, state capture thrived in these entities, this is SAA, SAA Technical, because they were eventually being run not in the interests of the people of South Africa for whom they were established, but in the interests of a select few who wielded power inside and outside of these entities. That is state capture.
Yeah, that is the proper definition of state capture. You don't go and capture the state or any other institution except to milk it for yourself. What that statement does not make clear is that a lot of the time, this state capture was also for the benefit of senior cadres in the African National Congress and the African National Congress itself. So those are some of the considerations that need just to be added to make that clear, because the fundraising processes of the ANC opened the door for state capture.
Sandile, we're going to have to leave it there. I hope you've got your energy drinks, because I've got a feeling that you're going to be up all night reading this gripping novel, which is the State Capture Report. Thanks so much indeed for your time. All right, that's political analyst Sandile Swana speaking to us about the first part of the Commission of Inquiry into alleged state capture, which has been released now and is available on the presidency's website, and other newspaper outlets where you can download this report. 800 and something pages, so it's a long read. Unfortunately, there is no summaries for parts 1 and parts 2. It'll only come in part 3, but it's certainly well worth starting to get to grips with what they found. And fraud and corruption has been found, and elements of state capture have been found by the Commission. So it's really just a question of who, what, where, when, why, and what the consequences might be.